So the other day, I was on Reels and my buddy Sam Wagner's video came up and he was touching on how creatives and other artists, these people hate making content. I think he was talking about like promoting content, like these 15-second clips to promote maybe a bigger piece of work that actually matters to them more. And it's like he was talking about why do we do it? If we all hate it so much, this idea of just, trying to maybe hit the algorithm and get these views so that it can promote these things that we do love. And I made a video the other day when I was talking about how we should stop focusing on trying to make content for virality and instead make content for growth. And that's kind of what I wanted to talk about more today. The idea of using this medium of content creation to build a skill that stacks across multiple arenas. So for me, this podcast, for example, it would be really hard for me to stay consistently making clips. I'm trying to make a clip every other day, and I'm trying to have a long form podcast once a week. And I've been consistent with this. And the reason for that is because I stopped focusing so much on whether or not the views are going to come and I'm going to hit the algorithm just right. That doesn't mean I don't want this to be successful from an attention standpoint, but it's very hard to create longevity when you're trying to hit a marker that's very hard to hit. It's a very saturated space. I like to make a joke that, I went from a very saturated space of music creation and I picked pretty much the only other space that's more saturated than that, which is podcasting. So if you're trying to base this goal off of, all right, I'm going to get views, I'm going to get attention, and you don't hit that mark, it's going to create this idea of dismotivation. I don't know if that's a word, but basically it's going to dissuade you from continuing to make videos in the long run. You're going to maybe post 1 or 2 videos because you have this momentum from the novelty of doing something new and this new podcast and oh my God, this is going to be great. But then when the views don't come in, you start to feel like I'm stupid. People are watching this and they probably just think, who does this person think he is? Why is he, worth listening to in front of a microphone? And it'll shut you down. It'll burn you out quick. So for me, it's about the skill of communication. That's my main goal. External validation and attention is a bonus. And that moves this whole podcast arena into something that I have control over. It's like one of the best things about working in construction is the amount of input you put into a project. You're going to see a direct correlation to the output. Once you're done with your 8-hour day, usually change happened. And as human beings, we want to feel the acceleration, not so much, it's like if you're in a train, you can't feel it even if you're going 100 miles an hour, but you can feel, obviously, the inertia of the acceleration. That's the same thing here. We want to feel the growth of our actions. And if you're trying to base your growth on how many people give a fuck, you're going to be feeling stagnant and then you're going to give up. But if you put your goal into communication, every single video I make here, I get more comfortable in front of the camera. Every guest I have on, I become a better interviewer. I try to become a better listener. There's so many active skills that every time I finish the podcast, I feel like I've grown something. I feel like I've moved forward. I feel the acceleration. And that's going to be the game changer for you. That's going to create the longevity that keeps you consistent enough to ironically get the initial goal of the attention, because that's what separates somebody who makes it in this space and someone who doesn't. And even actually, which is even a better point, I might not make it in this space. No one might ever give a shit about this podcast forever, but every single video I make, I become a better communicator for every single venture I choose to move towards in the future. What I would see as my foundation, as something I'd like to leave the viewer with, is the idea that clarity follows action. So once again, making this podcast or making a band or moving into a new career role, you're going to feel like an imposter. You're going to feel like a lot of uncertainty. And so in that situation, there's nothing that's going to be the cure-all besides action. You need to just step into the role. You need to start doing it. In construction, they call it seat time, when you're running excavators, cranes, whatever it is. And the more seat time you have, there's usually a direct correlation with how well put together that operator is. You know, a lot of little things happen, like you want your buckets if you're on an excavator nearby you, and you're always kind of keeping this sort of thing neat. Little details like this, you don't understand how important they are, or the way you move a trench box. I mean, these are construction terms, so you might not know what I'm talking about, but the point is, there's fine details that you pick up on through seat time, and this is the idea of action brings clarity. Our brains work in a way where it almost, you subconsciously integrate after you hit the reps. Look at anything you've ever done in life, any test you've ever studied for, anytime you're trying to download information into your brain, it just looks like repeat the same thing over and over again, or read the same thing over and over again. Then you fall asleep. The next day you wake up, you look at the paper that you were trying to memorize, and it seems like it's a lot easier to take in. And this is the idea behind action. You just put yourself in the situation. You might feel stressed and uncertain during the taking of the action, but the next day it's going to be a lot more manageable. That's why clarity follows action has been so huge for me in this podcast, for example. Obviously, I've never done this before. So one day I just decided, you know what? I'm just going to start a podcast. There was this big open area over here. You know, the band kind of was burning out, and I had all this band equipment over here. So I cleaned that up, and I cleaned up my whole house, and I had this big empty space here. You know, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to start a podcast. That very same day, this set you see behind me, it wasn't exactly a finished product, but it was close. And then within that week, I was making my first video. Within the next week, I had my first guest, and so on and so forth. And now I'm about to be on episode 6. I became much more comfortable in front of the camera. I've understood the equipment in front of me a lot better and how things work. I've been able to create iterations each time. If you never act, you just have ideas, and you just have analysis on how things could work and predictions. That's all it will ever be. The last thing, which might be the most important thing, for people who are attempting something big to make a big impact, who are high achievers, I believe that's someone like me. This might be somebody like you. It's really, really hard to smell the roses. It's really hard to stop feeling like you aren't enough. It seems like I always feel like it's good, but it could be better. And it's just exhausting in a lot of ways. I feel drained a lot of times because I want this awesome thing to happen, but, you know, the carrot always moves. You feel like you've done something that you've never done before, and maybe there's a high for a bit, but then that kind of loses its luster. And so we end up feeling like, okay, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? But it's never going to be satisfying. So at some point, and this is something I'm still trying to find the answer to, we need to decide, like, going on that walk around the block and just looking at the trees and smelling the air and feeling grateful for being outside and alive, it needs to be enough. It's just really hard for that to happen when you're somebody who feels like you want the most out of life. You feel like you can get these epic moments if you just push harder, try harder, gain this next skill, gain this next connection or network. You're going to meet the right person, or you're going to become the right person to finally feel enough. And that is a very hard thing for me to actually land on. As much as I understand the concept and I can describe it to you, and I'm sure this is relatable, I don't know the fix other than trying every single day and making the choice that I am enough. It's just, it never felt like enough to do that, which is funny, but it's true. I pray to God a lot of times at night, like, just take the wheel, dude. Like, obviously, whatever I'm doing in my mindset is just making me feel small, even though I'm trying to do all these big things. You know, people say you're a very busy person, man. You're always doing this or that. And it's like, I love it. I do enjoy it. at times, but at other times it's like I'm really just trying to feel enough through these things. And it's not in like this like pity me, depressed way. It's more just like I feel like there's something on the other side. And if I could just do something, I will finally get to the other side and grab it. And it's always just out of my reach.